A few months ago, my SaaS had 123 paying customers. Then over the next month, that number dropped all the way down to 80. Today, we just hit 100 again. And honestly, hitting 100 paying customers feels a lot different the second time. Back when we were at 123 paying customers, everything seemed to be going very well. But then something changed and we started losing customers. We went from 123 paying customers down to 120, but then 120 became 115, then it became 108, then 97, then 90, and eventually we were down to 80 paying customers. In total, we had lost 43 paying customers. And the weird thing is that I still don't know exactly why it happened. When we first reached 100 paying customers, it really did not feel like much. My co-founder and I basically just said, good job, and then we moved on. It wasn't some life-changing moment. It felt pretty much the same as having 98 or 99 paying subscribers. There was literally no difference. It was a nice milestone, but that was about it. The thing I really cared about was growth. I assumed we would just keep moving forward, and for a while we did. Eventually we reached 123 paying subscribers. And looking back at it, I think that's maybe where we got a little bit too comfortable. When we first launched Autosender, we were constantly shipping features. Back then, the product only had one main feature. It could send messages and that was about it. So for months, our entire workflow was pretty simple. People would request something and then we would build it. Then someone else would suggest another improvement and we would build that too. That momentum was really useful. It meant we were constantly improving the product and talking to users. And we were constantly giving people new reasons to stay excited. But over time, the product became much more complete. Since then, we've added so many new things that people don't really request new things anymore. And while that sounds like a good thing, it has also created a new problem. We started losing momentum. The conversations in our Discord server started to change. People were no longer spending as much time discussing the things that we should build next. Most people were just telling us how much they liked the product. Which is obviously great and I'm really thankful for that. But at the same time, the momentum matters. And when you lose that momentum, I think you'll lose a part of what makes a startup exciting. At around the same time, we started losing customers. Now I don't want to pretend that I handled this perfectly, because I didn't. The first thing I did was starting asking questions. I reached out to 7 subscribers who had cancelled their subscriptions. 3 of them replied, and what surprised me was that basically all 3 said the exact same thing. They told me there was nothing wrong with Autosender, they liked the product, and if they needed it again, they would probably subscribe in the future. They simply did not have anything to advertise anymore. On one hand, that's reassuring. It meant people weren't leaving because they were hating the product. But on the other hand, it really didn't solve the problem. Because if the product wasn't the issue, then why were so many people leaving? So I started looking for other possible reasons. I started looking for competitors, and there are definitely a lot more now. A lot of them have started to appear recently because AI makes it easier than ever to build software. I looked at our pricing and nobody was really complaining about that. And eventually I realized that for months I've been mostly guessing. I was guessing what users wanted, I was guessing what features would help, and I was guessing what would improve retention. To be fair, that worked surprisingly well for a while. We managed to reach 8,000 users and we managed to reach 123 paying users. But as the business grew bigger, guessing started to become a little bit less acceptable. I remember telling my co-founder that I needed to be more specific about retention and metrics. We needed better data so we could understand why people stayed and why people left, not just assume that we knew. At the same time, I encouraged him to focus more on marketing again. Some of his campaigns weren't running at the time, and if we wanted to keep growing, we needed to become more proactive again. So that's what we started doing. I added a feedback button to the website. I added better tracking because I wanted to understand why people were doing certain things and not just rely on my intuition. I never really realized the moment where we started to recover again. There wasn't some magical turning point. I didn't wake up one day and think, oh, we've figured it out now. The numbers just slowly started moving up again. We went from 81 to 85, then 90, then 95, and now back to 100. Which brings me back to something I said at the very beginning of the video. Hitting 100 paying customers at the first time did not really feel any special, but hitting 100 the second time did. Not because the number itself is important, but because we had to make a comeback. The first time it felt inevitable, and now the second time it kind of felt earned. And that's maybe the biggest lesson that I've learned from all of this. Sometimes you do everything you think you're supposed to, and the numbers still go down. Sometimes you don't get a clear answer. Sometimes you spend weeks trying to analyze and figure out what's happening, and you're still not completely sure. That doesn't mean the business is broken. And it definitely does not mean that you should stop. For us, losing 43 customers wasn't the end of the world. It was a reminder that we still have a lot to learn. Because the moment you think you've got everything figured out, that's also the moment you stop paying attention. Growth isn't a straight line, and I know there will be plenty of roadblocks until we hit 500 paying customers. But if you want to see what breaks next and how we fix that, hit the subscribe button. See you in the next one.